Every Sunday, NFL fans tune in expecting to watch warriors. Men who launch their bodies into danger for a living, over and over, without blinking. That's the deal football makes with its players. Hit or be hit. But hidden inside NFL history is a very different kind of story. A story about fear. About unbelievably talented players who had every physical gift in the world but froze the instant real contact came looking for them. Some turned their shoulders away from a football rather than take a hit to catch it. Some slowed down and stepped out of bounds a full second before they needed to. Some just stopped trying to tackle altogether, in front of millions of people on live television. And here's the part that makes this list so strange. Several of these players aren't forgotten busts. They're Hall of Famers, legends, men with rings and records and busts in Canton. This isn't a list of bad football players. This is a list of specific, documented moments, caught on camera, called out by teammates, coaches, and commentators that followed these men for the rest of their careers. Some of these players never lived it down. Others somehow turned the exact same criticism into a punchline they controlled themselves. Stick around until the end, because our number one pick built an entire Hall of Fame resume while openly joking about his own refusal to tackle anybody. Let's count down the 10 most cowardly moments in NFL history. Number 10 is Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie. On paper, he had everything a defense could want. Blazing speed, long arms, elite instincts for the football. The Arizona Cardinals used a first-round pick on him in 2008, and within 2 years he looked like a rising star, helping push the Cardinals all the way to the Super Bowl. But there was a problem lurking underneath all that talent. He didn't like putting his body in front of moving trains. During the 2010 season, analysts tracking missed tackles noticed something troubling. Rodgers-Cromartie had already blown more tackles than he had the entire previous year, and the season wasn't even finished yet. One play captured it perfectly. Kansas City receiver Dwayne Bowe caught a short pass right in front of him with nothing but open grass behind him. Rodgers-Cromartie didn't dive. He didn't even properly plant his feet. He watched Bowe jog into the end zone like a bystander watching traffic pass by. This wasn't a case of getting beaten by a better athlete. This was a cornerback deciding in real time that a tackle wasn't worth the collision. Over the rest of his career, he bounced between 6 different franchises, and every single stop came with the exact same whisper from coaches and scouts. Beautiful coverage skills. Allergic to contact. Fans in New York even watched him storm off the sideline mid-game once, after a heated argument with his own coaching staff, leaving his teammates to fight the game without him. Rodgers-Cromartie had the tools to be a shutdown corner for a decade. Instead, he became a cautionary tale about what happens when talent and toughness don't come as a package deal. He still carved out a long, well-paid career off pure athleticism alone. But whenever his name came up in film rooms, the conversation almost always circled back to the same uncomfortable question. Could you actually trust him to bring somebody down when the game was on the line? Number 9 is Nnamdi Asomugha. In 2011, the Philadelphia Eagles assembled what the media nicknamed their Dream Team. Star free agents flooded into the city that summer, and the biggest name of them all was a cornerback named Nnamdi Asomugha. During his years with the Oakland Raiders, quarterbacks were genuinely terrified to throw the ball anywhere near him. Analysts called him the best cover corner alive, a player so dominant that opposing offenses simply avoided his entire side of the field. But Philadelphia discovered something Oakland never really had to deal with. When quarterbacks refuse to throw at you for years, you almost never have to actually tackle anyone. That changed fast once he arrived in Philadelphia. In a game against the rival New York Giants, receiver Victor Cruz caught a pass directly in front of him near the goal line. Asomugha lunged at him, missed completely, and ended up face down on the turf while Cruz strolled untouched into the end zone. The clip got replayed constantly that season, a highlight reel of embarrassment for a player once considered untouchable. By the numbers, Asomugha missed close to 27% of his tackle attempts that year, one of the worst rates of any cornerback in the entire league. A man once labeled the most feared defensive back in football suddenly looked hesitant to put a shoulder into anybody. The Eagles' star-studded roster collapsed that season, missing the playoffs entirely, and Asomugha's very public struggles became one of the lasting symbols of everything that went wrong with that team. Fans who had celebrated his signing that summer spent the rest of the year wincing every time the ball came anywhere near him, waiting to see if he'd actually finish the play this time. Number 8 is Marcus Peters. Marcus Peters could change a football game with his hands alone. Interceptions, deflected passes, forced fumbles, he had every trick in the book. But ask anyone who watched the Kansas City Chiefs during the 2017 season and they'll tell you that tackling was never part of his game plan. That October, broadcasters started openly describing what they called a historic level of unwillingness to actually bring a ball carrier to the ground. The very next week, in a nationally televised game against Dallas, Peters had a clean shot at star running back Ezekiel Elliott. Instead of squaring his shoulders and wrapping up, he dove low at Elliott's ankles from an angle that gave him almost no real chance of success. Elliott simply hopped over him without breaking stride. In the broadcast booth, announcer Tony Romo couldn't resist making a joke, saying live on air that Peters made Hall of Fame cornerback Deion Sanders look like a good tackler by comparison. It was meant as a punchline, but everybody watching understood exactly what Romo meant by it. Peters was a ball hawk who would rather gamble everything on an interception than absorb contact just to bring a runner down safely. That reputation trailed him through stops in Kansas City, Los Angeles, Baltimore, and beyond. Brilliant hands on that football. Reluctant shoulders on anybody carrying it. Coaches loved what he did for the turnover column. Special teams coordinators dreaded putting him on the field anytime a tackle actually needed to be made in space. Number 7 is Todd Pinkston. Some players get remembered for the touchdowns they scored. Todd Pinkston is remembered for the one play where he ran away from one. In December of 2004, the Philadelphia Eagles receiver was streaking deep down the sideline against the Washington Redskins on national television. Quarterback Donovan McNabb delivered the football right on target, a wide-open, almost certain touchdown. But safety Ryan Clark was closing in fast from behind, and Pinkston clearly saw him coming. Instead of extending his arms to make the catch, he turned his entire upper body away from the football, bracing himself for a hit that never actually landed, because he never touched the ball in the first place. It fell harmlessly to the turf. Commentator Joe Theismann, a former NFL quarterback himself, could barely believe what he'd just watched. On air, he told viewers they'd heard of players with alligator arms before, but what Pinkston had just shown them was something else entirely. Alligator body. The clip spread across sports television for weeks. Fans slapped him with cruel nicknames that stuck for years. Pinkston later explained that stadium lights had made him lose track of the football. But by then, the damage to his reputation was already permanent. It didn't help that months earlier, in the biggest game of his career, the NFC Championship, he'd been physically overwhelmed by a much tougher Carolina cornerback all night long. Within 2 seasons, Pinkston was out of the league entirely. Decades later, fans still bring up that single frozen moment whenever his name comes up, proof of how one instant of hesitation can define an entire career in the public's memory, no matter how many other plays a player actually made. Number 6 is DeSean Jackson. DeSean Jackson was pure electricity. Blink, and he was already 50 yards down the field. But early in his career, that same electric speed came paired with a well-earned reputation for disappearing the moment real contact showed up. In November of 2011, in a game against the New England Patriots, backup quarterback Vince Young looked his way twice in the end zone. Both passes were catchable. Both times, Jackson pulled his arms back at the very last second instead of fully extending for the football, because a defender was closing in fast. Commentators called it a textbook case of alligator arms, right there in front of a national audience. His own head coach, Andy Reid, benched him for the rest of the game without hesitation. This wasn't an isolated incident either. A year earlier, a devastating hit from Atlanta safety Dunta Robinson left Jackson with a serious concussion, and afterward, teammates and coaches quietly noticed a real change in how willing he was to go across the dangerous middle of the field. Jackson had the pure speed to become one of the greatest deep threats the league has ever seen, and in many ways, he absolutely was. But that speed seemed to come from a deep instinct to stay far away from contact whenever humanly possible, and more than once, that same instinct cost his team a touchdown, a game, and a piece of his own reputation. Number 5 is Eric Dickerson. Here's where this list gets uncomfortable, because Eric Dickerson is a Hall of Famer. One of the greatest running backs to ever step onto a football field. In 1984, he rushed for over 2,000 yards in a single season, a record that still stands to this day, decades later. But even a legend like Dickerson had a habit that raised eyebrows across the entire league. He was famous for stepping out of bounds the second he sensed a big hit coming, willingly giving up extra yards just to avoid unnecessary contact. This wasn't laziness. It was calculation, learned over thousands of brutal collisions. Years after retiring, Dickerson openly admitted to the habit, and even revealed that he'd personally advised a young Adrian Peterson to start doing the exact same thing, protecting his own body over chasing one meaningless extra yard. Old-school teammates and opponents from a rougher, more punishing era of football saw it very differently at the time. To players raised on the belief that you finish every single run by delivering a hit, stepping out of bounds early looked like walking away from a fight. It's a strange, almost poetic twist in football history. The same instinct that got Dickerson quietly mocked by tougher, older-school runners is the exact same instinct that modern doctors now beg every single running back in the league to develop. Dickerson may have played it safe more than most, but he also played longer, stayed healthier, and rushed for more total yards than almost anyone who's ever carried a football. Looking back now, it's hard to call that cowardice without also admitting it was smart. But at the time, in locker rooms full of men who prided themselves on absorbing punishment, it earned him a reputation he never fully shook. Number 4 is Randy Moss. Randy Moss was arguably the single most gifted receiver of his entire generation. 6'4", blistering speed, hands that snatched footballs directly out of the air like they were magnetized. But Moss carried one well-known weakness, and it showed up on the single biggest stage in professional sports. In Super Bowl 47, playing for the San Francisco 49ers against the Baltimore Ravens, Moss ran a route straight through the dangerous middle of the field. Quarterback Colin Kaepernick threw it his way, giving him a real chance to make a play. Instead of fighting through contact for the football, Moss pulled his arms back at the last possible second as safety Ed Reed came flying in, and the ball fell harmlessly into Reed's hands for an interception. Former linebacker Bill Romanowski, watching from the broadcast booth that night, didn't hold anything back, shouting live on air that Moss had alligator-armed the football on the sport's biggest possible stage. This wasn't a one-time slip either. For years, critics had quietly noted that Moss avoided running short, physical routes over the middle, the exact area of the field where the hardest, most punishing hits happen, sticking almost entirely to deep routes where defenders couldn't touch him until well after the ball had already left the quarterback's hand. Moss finished his career with more receiving touchdowns than almost anyone who has ever played the position. But even a first-ballot Hall of Famer couldn't outrun the label that, whenever the middle of the field turned dangerous, he'd rather protect his own body than fight for the football. Number 3 is Antonio Cromartie. Antonio Cromartie had blazing speed and elite ball skills, exactly the kind of tools that made him a multiple-time Pro Bowler. But in the biggest moment of a playoff game between his San Diego Chargers and the New York Jets, all of that talent seemed to vanish in one single, telling instant. Jets running back Sean Green broke through the line of scrimmage with a clear path to the end zone. Cromartie was right there. He had the angle. He had more than enough speed to close the distance and bring him down. Instead, he barely lifted a hand, and Green walked into the end zone like nobody was chasing him at all. The Chargers lost that game, and with it, their entire season. What made this moment stand out wasn't just the missed tackle itself. It was what happened afterward. Cromartie didn't make excuses to reporters. Months later, he openly admitted that he should have made that play, and that tackling had simply never been the strongest part of his game. Rather than defend himself, he basically confirmed, in his own words, exactly what every single fan had already suspected while watching the replay over and over. For a player with genuine Pro Bowl talent, that quiet honesty felt almost more shocking than the missed tackle itself. It confirmed that when the moment demanded he lower his shoulder and make a physical, punishing play, he simply chose not to. Number 2 is Jay Cutler. Few moments in NFL history sparked as much genuine anger from other players as what happened to Jay Cutler during the 2011 NFC Championship game. Cutler and the Chicago Bears were one single win away from reaching the Super Bowl. Early in the game, he took a hit that injured his knee. He tried to fight through it, went back out to start the third quarter, but soon left for good, replaced first by backup Todd Collins and then by a third-string rookie named Caleb Haney. What followed was one of the most brutal pile-ons in modern league history, and it didn't come from angry fans in the stands. It came from other professional players. Running back Maurice Jones-Drew wrote publicly that he'd played through an entire season on a damaged knee himself. Defensive lineman Darnell Dockett said he would have looked at Cutler differently if they'd been teammates that day. Linebacker Derek Brooks openly questioned whether Cutler even had the heart for a moment that big. Even Hall of Fame cornerback Deion Sanders joined in on the criticism. The story exploded across sports television for days afterward, with commentators debating endlessly whether Cutler had quietly quit on his own team in the single biggest game of his career. His own backup quarterback Caleb Haney defended him fiercely afterward, insisting Cutler wasn't a quitter at all and that he'd stayed fully engaged, coaching Haney up from the sideline for the entire second half. But the damage to his reputation was already done. An MRI later confirmed Cutler had suffered a real sprained ligament in his knee. Doctors fully backed up his decision to come out. None of that seemed to matter. In a league built on the idea of playing hurt no matter what, Jay Cutler became the face of a debate that still resurfaces today. Every single time a star player leaves a massive game early. To this day, some fans call it the fairest criticism a quarterback has ever received. Others call it one of the ugliest overreactions in NFL history, aimed at a man who was simply hurt in front of the entire country at the worst possible moment. And now, the man who might be the most famous example of all, because he never even bothered to hide it. Number 1 is Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders is a Hall of Famer, a 2-time Super Bowl champion, 53 career interceptions, 9 defensive touchdowns. By almost any measure you can think of, one of the greatest cornerbacks who has ever played the sport of football. And yet, Sanders was also famous, for his entire 14-year career, for barely ever tackling anybody at all. According to teammates and coaches, Sanders sometimes wouldn't even bother wearing full shoulder pads during practice, joking openly that he had no plans to tackle anybody anyway, so why bother? His former teammate, quarterback Troy Aikman, once said on live television that Sanders had a specific name for it. He called them business decisions, choosing to let a ball carrier run right past him rather than risk his own body for a tackle he simply didn't feel like making. Reporters later estimated that Sanders averaged barely over 2 tackles a game across his entire career, an almost unbelievably low number for a full-time defensive starter in the NFL. In 2017, broadcaster Tony Romo brought the whole topic back into the spotlight on live television, joking that a struggling young cornerback was making Sanders look good at tackling by comparison. Sanders, never one to stay quiet for long, fired right back at Romo on air, reminding everyone watching about his 2 championship rings. What makes Sanders different from everyone else on this entire list is that he never once denied any of it. He didn't get defensive about the tackling criticism at all. He got defensive about his legacy, his rings, his Hall of Fame case, because deep down, he already knew the truth. He was never paid to tackle anybody. He was paid to shut down the greatest receivers alive, and for nearly 15 years, almost nobody in the world did that better, even while quietly, deliberately, avoiding contact whenever he possibly could. That's the paradox that makes him number 1 on this list. Not the missed tackles themselves, but the fact that he turned them into a punchline instead of a weakness, and the football world let him get away with it, because the rings spoke louder than the tackle count ever could. 10 different players. 10 completely different stories. Some, like Rodgers-Cromartie and Asa Muga, watched their reputations quietly crumble because of it. Others, like Dickerson, Moss, and Sanders, walked straight into the Hall of Fame anyway, proving that avoiding contact and being a legend aren't always opposites in this sport. Football is an incredibly brutal game, and every single player on this list still chose to step onto that field, week after week, season after season, knowing exactly what kind of violence was waiting for them out there. Maybe that's worth remembering the next time you're tempted to call somebody scared. Fear and self-preservation aren't always the same thing, even when they look identical on a replay. Which player on this list surprised you the most? Let me know down in the comments. And if you want to see the 10 hardest hitters in NFL history next, the players sitting on the complete opposite end of this list, make sure you're subscribed, because that video is coming very soon.